All right, good morning, folks. Let's get started. Thank you all for joining us for our webinar today regarding how the security business collaboration is the key to cloud data security today. We're delighted to be joined by Jerry Kowalski, America's CISO for Jefferies, and by Jonathan Sander, Security Field CTO for Snowflake. So what's our context here today? The natural organizational tension that's existed between security and the business has been ever present in our industry. But there's been a confluence of recent factors in the last couple of years that's made this relationship between security and the business absolutely essential to the successful modern enterprise. So the first thing is the sheer amount of data that's moving to the cloud has, as organizations embark on their digital transformation activities, has really expanded the surface of assets that need to be protected. So that was the first thing. And that's compounded by the fact that the number of users that need to access this data is also growing faster than ever before. So we've got data scientists, market analysts, a myriad of other users that all need fast access to this data. And in our context today, by fast, we certainly mean performance, which is paramount, but also fast in terms of the time from when they request access to the data to when they get it. That really drives the speed of business. And that complexity in terms of who can access what, under which context, for how long, that's all right now in the heads of the data stewards and the data owners that are closest to that information. And the third and final factor is, of course, that the responsibility for protecting that information and that data still remains, as it should, in the hands of information security, folks like Jerry. And their challenge is now doubly kind of compounded. First is Jerry's team and other InfoSec teams need to quickly ramp up on platforms like Snowflake and all the other places like Redshift and DynamoDB where this information may end up living. So the teams have to ramp up very, very quickly and understand the constructs and the rudiments of each of those platforms. But they are also doubly challenged because now, assuming they ramp up quickly on that, they know how to protect things in those platforms, but the information on what needs to be protected still is in the hands and the heads of the business. So that's the tightrope that the modern CISO and the modern CDO need to traverse if they're going to propel their organization forward while still keeping it off the front page of the journal. And with that cheery backdrop, we'll start our conversation today with the customer's perspective from Jerry Kowalski of Jefferies. So Jerry, so glad to have you with us this morning. Would be great if you could share a little bit about your own background and your journey over the past couple of years, helping steward Jefferies on their path to secure digital transformation.
No, thanks for having me. So once again, I'm Jerry Kowalski. I look after security for Jefferies. I've been here for 10 years. When you asked me to join and be part of this webinar, I was quite excited because it's really close to what I've been doing for the last 2 years at Jefferies is working with Enterprise Data Lake. When I first was involved in Enterprise Data Lake at Jefferies, I was both excited that the firm is taking initiative to digitalize our data and provide more value to our internal users and our clients. But at the same time, a little bit worried, right? With a security hat on, is how we're going to protect it. You know, there was really not much technology or discussions involved. How do we protect data lakes? What's happening is you're taking dozens and dozens of data from many applications that existed for years within the firm and stripping away all of the policies and protections I've had and just put it in a bucket, right? And that summarizes the problem aspect of it. So what I'm going to do is probably spend maybe 10 minutes or so describing what we've done at Jefferies in terms of how we approach Enterprise Data Lake from security perspective, some of the challenges, but also the solutions that we've implemented using TrustLogix. So just very quickly, everyone should have an objective when they're developing Enterprise Data Lake. Ours was simple. We create a data catalog so that not only you provide a platform for users, data scientists, front office, to know what they're looking for, a shopping cart practically, but also you need to provide data governance and data access to know who owns that data and to define a process of how do we get access to this, right? Now that you stripped away all the policies and access that you've had from application perspective, you need to reestablish that. You need to reestablish not only the access, but also visibility of who's accessing what data. So the key challenges were, as I mentioned before, there was never a centralized catalog. There was a catalog per application, but once you group all that data together, a centralized catalog does not exist. At the time when we started this, there was really no granular entitlements built into many different cloud providers, like Lake Formation, for instance, never had it. Obviously now over the last 12 to 14 months, they started to develop this, but it was a challenge when we started looking at EDL 2+ years ago. There was really nothing in the market. You could actually restrict it maybe to a file, maybe to a specific user, but not really in terms of deep down level of verification of the data and the user. Same thing with security. There was really not many channels. There were many channels, but there was not many ways of getting in between those channels to protect that data. How do you protect all the different sources that you can log in to a platform and consume that data, whether from Python or Jupyter Hub? There's many different ways of accessing that data. So the challenge was out there, but thinking about it, you know, when it comes to granular entitlements or provisioning, that technology has been there for 20 years. It was just never there for cloud. And that was one of the challenges that we wanted to make sure that we take into account to review different technologies. So in 2020, we developed deployed a firm-wide catalog that allowed users to browse through that data. But it's an expensive thing to do because you need to understand the data. You need to find owners and catalog. So you can't have dirty data or unknown owners because everything falls apart. We also work from InfoSec and EDL team to find the right vendors. We reviewed 4 different vendors to help us define a proper entitlements and shopping cart experience, right? We needed to develop that Amazon shopping cart experience where you add things that you want to access as a user. I want these properties, these attributes, and basically check out and have proper owners review and approve it. So we've selected TrustLogix as our solution, and we implemented this just a little bit over a year ago. So in the next slide, I'll just go just a little bit deeper into objectives. Obviously, the objective was to not only create a data catalog, but also create that approval process. On the right-hand side, you'll see JRequest. This is a Jefferies request system. So our goal was to create a solution that works and integrates with a shopping cart experience. From us, that Amazon experience is JRequest. So we wanted to make sure that users, front office, developers, data scientists are using a familiar approval process that already existed. And that seamless integration was key. We didn't want to have an experience where users go into one site to view catalog, another site to browse through it or request it. The seamless integration was key. Not only seamless integration between the data catalog and the request system, but also the policy creation. There are a couple of attributes that we wanted to make sure that the entitlements and access control had as part of the solution. One was consistent granular access, because now data is coming from many different systems. We wanted to make sure we have the power of selecting attributes, selecting users, Active Directory groups, and creating very easy to consume policies. As part of this, we actually created a new group called Data Security Admins that were proficient in knowing data, understanding data, but also using TrustLogix to define the policies. So as part of this, we were able to integrate the shopping cart, the request and approval system, but also the engine that approves and controls access to it. So in the next slide, I'll go over just high-level architecture diagram of how everything ties together and what makes our EDL successful within Jefferies. And I'll take questions after I'm done through the slides. But here is the challenge. One of the challenges, right? We have many different sources: Snowflake, Redshift, Salesforce, databases, files, etc. as 3 buckets. So our challenge was, how do we control access to many different sources? Like if you were a shop where you only had Snowflake, you only had Redshift, maybe there are solutions natively that you can utilize. But if you have complexity that you see here, you need to have one system that controls all of it. It would be really inefficient and ineffective to go into one platform to set up policies for Redshift, another platform for Salesforce, and have many different tools connect to them. That would make this exercise very different. What we do from this data lake is, first we extract metadata, which allows us to crawl to that data and create a catalog. The step 2 and 3, this is the expensive part of this. The enrichment technical data you see on top, the business analyst has to understand what the data is coming through and properly catalog it to create that shopping cart experience. We need to understand what that data is, who owns it, and who needs to approve that access. We're enhancing this part of this where we're creating birthright access, which is very common from identity and access perspective, but we're doing the same thing from data access perspective. So for instance, if you are a research person and you should have access to all data from research, we're creating a concept of birthright access that would allow access to that data. You should have access on-prem, therefore you should have it on EDL. And this is the second part of the challenge is there are many different users and consumers of that product. Product being EDL, we have data scientists using Python, you have software developers using their own application teams, you have business users. We wanted a technology that allows us to control access regardless of that layer. So you're kind of left with data and the users, and in the middle is something that the consumer should not really think about much, right? They shouldn't think about integration of another technology. It should be seamless, and that was really the goal of it. So this is that piece that we at Jefferies created, is that integration between the catalog and JRequest. That was critical to make sure that someone goes into a shopping cart to purchase that data or ask for that data, there's no purchasing, then the request is sent on automatically from that system. And that's the second part of this, is if approval is required and a policy needs to be created, data admins would take over and create that specific policy. And there are cases where policy already exists. So a user before them may have asked for access to a specific set of data and the policy is already existing. That creates and bypasses creation of the policy. But if the user asks for additional sets of data from different data owners, policy would have been created by data admins and then approved and access would have been granted. So with that said, I mean, this is kind of a high-level overview of what we've done at Jefferies, just to kind of showcase a little bit maybe of the challenges and a high-level workflow. But the idea of security being fully integrated with data lake strategy, it's a must, right? Because it makes data stewards, data owners in full control, not only from approval perspective, but also viewing who's accessing their data perspective. And it's seamless because of the fact that you were not integrating a proxy solution or solution that it degrades the performance of the platform. Is the way Trust Logic works that later on Ganesh was going to go over. It's really seamless, and that makes everyone at the table, both from the business, security, and EDL perspective, happy with the solution that we provided. Thank you.
Terrific, Jerry. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we've had questions start to come in. So what I thought we would do is we'd do a question or two now, and then save some more for after we're done with kind of the roundtable part. FYI for the attendees, you have a Q&A panel in your Zoom, so please feel free, as a couple of you already have, to put in questions. So the first question that came in, Jerry, is where does compliance fit into this modern cloud data world? And that question probably makes total sense, right? We've got data that needs to be governed, and now we've got data going in a lot of different places and being accessed by a lot of different people. So where does compliance fit into this jigsaw puzzle at Jefferies?
Yeah, so compliance is in many organizations, not just Jefferies, is catching up to the concepts of enterprise data like EDL in terms of how do you monitor, how do you access this. From our perspective, we need to provide assurance that access to the data is reviewed and approved. So compliance and internal audit, they care about Jerry request. They want to know that there is set of data, there are owners, and there's approval process that someone reviewed and approved access for this. And that's critical for it, because if you don't have a formal review process and approval process, this is where you get into trouble of why somebody got access to data that shouldn't have had. The built-in features that we're going to be looking at extending this capability is looking at what we currently have is how do you keep data separate from the data you're not supposed to have, which is a kind of segregation of duties for data, which is another level of complexity that this solution, enterprise data lake overall, brings into our world. But that's coming up next.
That makes sense. And let's see, there was one question that I apologize to the questioner. I can't quite parse it properly. But the question, so for the questioner, it's the person that asked the question that had a reference to Edward Snowden. If you could maybe rephrase the question, we'll loop back to it the second time around. And the other question that came in that I'd like to cover with you, Jerry, before we move on, is you kind of mentioned JRequest, which is your shopping cart experience. So for cases where the policy already exists, what does that request approval cycle look like? How long is an analyst or a data scientist waiting for access that they should have access to, data that they should have access to?
Yeah, so we put the onus on the review request process to the data stewards, data owners, right? So security is not approving access. We build the process and the tools that provide the capability for it. So it could range from anywhere, as soon as somebody clicks on approve, the access is granted, right? Because it uses Active Directory group and user IDs to grant access to that to the data. So it's really if you want access now, you call the approver or approvers, if it's many data stewards, and ask them to approve the request. So it ranges probably, I would say, within 24 hours, but obviously can be expedited because there is no, the only, after the approvals, the only thing that needs to be created is the policy. So if the policy exists, you're done. You practically have access because there is no user creations. We use AD groups. I think there was a question earlier. You get granted to the data sets. If the policy needs to be created, then obviously there is a little bit more work that needs to be done because data admins now have to create a policy specific for that user, saying this user is getting this role and this is the policy related. You can access, these 10 columns and couple of rows depending on the value sets.
And I can see how that fits into the flow that you'd laid out for us. So I was going to move on, but there was one question that just came in that fits into something you exactly just said, Jerry. So we'll do one more before we sure. Keep the party going, which is simple and easy. It's how does identity and access management fit into this data access paradigm?
Yeah, no, so it's actually fully integrated, and that's the beauty of it. We're using Active Directory groups and user IDs to ensure that whoever you are logging into the platform as, so if you're running your Python as your user account, that already has that identity. So we didn't have to develop a new identity platform management. We use AD and AD groups to manage policies and user access.
That's, using technology as designed and intended is a
It was,
fantastic
yeah.
thing.
So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to have another set of attributes and another identity management platform. It makes sense to integrate it because it's seamless. There's no another login. You just, if you're running your Python as that user, you already have access. There's seamless. It reduces the noise created by users complaining they don't have access, they can't log in, I don't have access. It reduces all of it. It should be seamless. So it does take a little bit more effort on cataloging the data, ensuring that you have the data owners, ensuring that you have the right technology and support on the bottom, but it all pays off.
Terrific. All right, so thank you for this background, Jerry, and we'll certainly be coming back to you shortly. But one of the key data storage platforms, data warehouse platforms for Jefferies is Snowflake, and that's where we're delighted to have Snowflake's security field CTO, Jonathan Sander, join us to kind of give us his perspective. Jonathan has a ton of experience, both certainly at Snowflake, but specifically within financial services. So would love to hear your perspective, Jonathan.
Sure. Thanks, Cheat. So I think my role here today, more than anything else, is going to be Jerry's hype man. That's what I'm going to be here today, because I do work with a lot of financial institutions and other, global multinational, highly regulated organizations. And I kind of wish they would all be like Jefferies, having clear objectives, using, as you just said, Chief, technology as intended, right? But if I take a step back and think about why that would be the case, and maybe make slight reference to what we have on the slide at some point too. If you could forgive me, I'll begin by quoting from our friends at Gartner, right? What I see here at Jefferies is a really mature late stage digital transformation, right? Now, what's interesting to me is that a lot of people in the industry, right, they hear digital transformation and they hear it as move to the cloud. And that's a mistake, right? That's a fundamental error. Not only does it mean they probably didn't read the source material where that stuff was described, but it also means it misses something really key about all of this, which is the focus on data, right? Now, in my past, I've worked with a lot of shopping cart systems that have tried to, grant access and do governance correctly. And they've all been very fractured. It was very interesting to me when the question came out about the identity access management, because I've been on the other side of those too, where you do identity shopping carts, right? You have data shopping carts, but in each case, they always left the business to their own devices, right? They always left the business out in the cold. They had to know what group to ask for. They had to know what resource to ask for. They had to know what application to ask for, right? And I think the fundamental shift that Jefferies is taking here, and I think the real key to understanding what digital transformation really means, is giving the user the ability to ask for the data they really want. It doesn't matter what the tool is they're going to use with the data. It doesn't matter what mechanics, what AD group, what policy, what other thing needs to happen to give them access to the data. They don't care at all about any of that, and they shouldn't have to. And that's what digital transformation really means. And yes, cloud is an enabling technology for that. But if you did it well, you could do that all on-prem. I mean, good luck, but it's not impossible to get digital transformation correct without cloud. It's just that cloud was born into a world where that was the focus already. It was built with those principles in mind. And I think that's where it gets twisted, where people think digital transformation just means cloud. And I think that gets to the heart of why we're having this conversation today, why we're holding up Jefferies as an example, because if you look at what you need to accomplish to have this mature stance that they have, well, you have to look at it from the point of view of data, from the point of view of what your business wants from that data. And obviously, Snowflake That's sort of what our business is right? Enabling organizations to do that really well. Now, for my part, I'm the janitor, basically. I just do security stuff, right? So on the whole of what Snowflake is about, I think about this slide more than anything else, right? And the governance capabilities that we make available. But what I find interesting in relation to what was described earlier by Jerry is that what we focus on here is making sure we're a good citizen in that larger process, right? That we make it available for the platforms that our customers have to come in and ensure that they're going to get the protections and the visibility that they need in order to achieve this mature digital transformation. And, I always think of this, and I don't know how many people in the audience are actually identity people. I was happy to see that question because maybe this thought will land. In identity, you often hear this concept, and I guess it predates identity as well, but you hear this concept of, policy access point, policy decision point, policy enforcement point. And if I break all that down, if we can get that other slide back, if I break all that down, right, what it really means is that there are multiple entities involved in enforcing policy, and there's different roles that each one plays. What Snowflake's role is right now, right? Because in a world, to Jerry's point earlier, in a world where your world was only Snowflake, which, I'm sure we would be thrilled about that, but it's not the real world. It's not what anybody looks like right now. Well, I mean, I'm sure I shouldn't say that. There are definitely probably all Snowflake shops out there. I don't intend to talk to them because I talk to these gigantic financials all the time that look more like Jefferies with lots of data sources. And, if you only had Snowflake, then you would only need to think about Snowflake, maybe. But if you have more than that, then what you need is Snowflake to play nice in that architecture or a similar architecture to the one Jerry showed. And that's what we maniacally focus on, right? These capabilities are all built to be driven from the outside, driven by code, right? The best way you could use this is to have something which is automating and orchestrating this. And certainly TrustLogix is a great candidate for that. And that's our foreseeable future too, is building up the capabilities in Snowflake to make it easier to have that kind of mature approach to governance through all these other platforms, through a business-driven outlook, through a fully digitally transformed, data-driven point of view, right? That's what we want to do from governance point of view, and of course, obviously from the larger Snowflake point of view. All right, so that's enough for me. I'll come back during Q&A, but
no, we'll definitely come back to you during Q&A. But just one point, obviously, just for those folks in the audience that already know Snowflake well, which is probably a good portion, or at least the ones that can see the slide. Clearly, there's an incredibly rich and powerful security framework built core into the Snowflake platform. So where do you see, and at the same time, we know through things like Snowpark that there's a tremendous focus on technology partnerships at Snowflake. So how do you see those two playing together? Like where if you've already got all this powerful security tech built in, where does the ecosystem fit in?
Well, I mean, a couple of things come to mind. I mean, first of all, right, again, it's about us playing our proper role, right? Everything goes back to RBAC when you talk about security, and eventually, right? But it's about us playing our proper role. And as far as I can see, right, if you look on this slide, there's a lot of things missing here, right? You don't see catalog, you don't see lineage, you don't see policy access point, you don't see policy management, right? Maybe it's not the best look for a vendor to call it all the things they don't do, but it's because we focus on the things we need to be good at to be part of those architectures that Jefferies calls out, that we understand that this is the place where we can deliver the most value, right? And so the ecosystem is crucial in that part. And it might be, something like a TrustLogix that, takes the burden out of a lot of that work. I mean, but we've got born in the cloud companies who are sitting there with Terraform doing all of those similar things too, right? With an infrastructure as code approach. If you've got the elbow grease to spare, and you've got the discipline to do it, you can get that done too. So I think that's the first thought. The second thought is, when I look down the future, right, two things like, Jeet just said Snowpark as if that means something to anybody. We're opening up our platform more and more every day, right? We are letting people in, customers, partners, and anybody in between to come use the platform to do more with data. And Snowpark is a means to essentially write applications natively inside the Snowflake platform, inside the Snowflake Data Cloud. I'll make marketing happy and say Data Cloud out loud. And the idea is that Snowpark is giving you freedom to do that in multiple different ways, multiple different languages, and certainly partners like TrustLogix are looking at that with very wide eyes and anticipating all the things that they'll be able to do to come in and add more power to all of this. Because it's a great flex to put up a slide like this and have lots of points on it, but we all know that, once we get into the real world of use cases for customers, some of this is not going to mean exactly what they want. It's not going to do exactly the way they want it. It's not going to do that one little thing that, maybe a carryover from their old world that they want to make sure keeps getting applied. Well, if you have the freedom to essentially come in and edge those things into the platform through something like Snowpark, especially if that's orchestrated by a third party, then you get more power out of it. And we want to enable that, right? Because again, this stuff shouldn't get in the way of the users getting to the data driven. That's digital transformation. That's what we want to enable with everything, including these governance features. And Snowpark is going to be a major part of that going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. So if we think about the pieces, we've already heard from Jerry about their whole process for data flow, how the EDL, the Enterprise Data Lake, got created. That Snowflake is a key piece of that. And now we've seen how Snowflake has rich internal constructs, and at the same time has created the hooks for an ecosystem to be built that can leverage those constructs. So with that, I would like to now turn things over for a few minutes to Ganesh Kirti. Ganesh is the founder and CEO of TrustLogix. And Ganesh, it was exactly for this kind of scenario that you had the initial genesis of the idea that became TrustLogix. So please walk us through that a little bit, sir. Oh, Ganesh, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you so much, Ranjit. Thank you, Jonathan and Jerry. You guys just make it easy for me to do my part of it here. Hi, everyone. Good morning. What I'll do is I'll go a little bit details into what Jerry was referring to, TrustLogix solutions, the way they are using it at Jefferies. And then also, as I talk about some of the details, I'll also highlight the capabilities, the Snowflake platform capabilities that Jonathan referred to in the previous slide. So with that said, let me start with the problem, the way we see it. We've been talking to a lot of companies. I'm in the interest of time, I'm going to just move a little bit fast in here as well. What I'm showing here is what's given to most of the companies. The data is going into the cloud, and then they're using the best of the breed data solutions in the cloud. It may end up in one cloud, they're using multiple data solutions, or it may end up across multiple clouds. When I say data solutions, there are different use cases: data lake, data warehouse, BI dashboard reporting tools, machine learning platforms. So net is data is growing. It's continuing to grow in the cloud, and then that's going across these multiple clouds. And then you have the data consumers. They include CDOs and data owners and data stewards and data consumers. There's various terms there, but net is they're all the data folks that are looking to use data. And they have different purpose to access data, and they have different entitlements based on which they're allowed to access data. And they just simply want to be productive. They just want to build their models. They want to build analytics. They want to gain insights from the data. They just want to be productive and really get access to the latest and greatest data, however long they want. The data that they need. That's just one part of it in enterprise. The second part is the security. There are a set of teams within a company. It depends on which company you look at. It's a one team or multiple teams. But what I'm showing here is a category of security teams that could include legal and privacy teams. There is a security team, typically under CISO organization, like Jerry was talking about. And then there's the audit compliance team. So all these different teams, they have responsibility to ensure that the data usage is safe. The folks that are using the data, they have the right entitlements, and they're allowed to access only what they're allowed to access. And that's what they're responsible for. They want to ensure that, that's what's happening within the businesses, and data owners are ensuring that that's what's being implemented. And they want to have an evidence that that's what's happening from the business risk perspective and the compliance perspective. But then it's not so easy. If they don't have evidence, if they don't have that auditability, if they don't have that defensible way of ensuring that they are compliant, they start creating friction. That there's going to be a friction between these two teams, and they start looking for manual processes and manual approvals. And sometimes it may take weeks and weeks to get approvals for someone to access data here. If they are lucky, if they are not, they may not give an access to data. It really slows down from the challenges perspective. It just starts becoming siloed. It just starts creating a friction that slows down the business. So this is really where we see the biggest challenges. And then also the another angle here is the data is moving across these different platforms. And there's really a security implementation in when it comes to access controls, when it comes to visibility. It's not that easy. Every cloud vendor, every platform has done a pretty good job of implementing security, but they're all done in a different ways. There is no standard, there's no real reference architecture in the industry today. So that's where we are coming in. And then I want to talk about how we are solving this challenge, how we bring these two community of groups, security and business and data owners together to make it possible. Ideally, it would be best if data folks here, data consumers have flexibility to access data when they need it, how long they need it. At the same time, the security folks have a control visibility and where they're able to show the evidence that all the rules and policies are implemented as they would like it to be done. So that's really where we come in. So let me talk about that. As I said, there is really no standard today the way we see it. I've been building security products 20 years, have a, security, previous to TrustLogix, cloud security. Today, there's really no standard in the industry across multiple clouds. Your data is moving, but security perspective. So what we thought we should do is there has to be a methodical, systematic way to solve this problem. So we adopted this framework, a data security governance framework. It's basically works in 4 different steps. So let me walk through the steps here. The step number 1 is, and again, the goal here is how fast can we bring the security and data owners and data consumers together. That's really the goal here. So as part of that, the step number 1 is we really want to keep businesses do what they are doing, the data owners, data consumers, let them have it, let them be productive, but we simply want to monitor. We want to discover what is going on within their data usage patterns, data access patterns. These include who is accessing the data, what type of tools they are using to access data. Is there any data that is not protected? Is there any dark data sitting in the cloud that no one is using? So various things along the lines of that. You want to discover and learn about how data is used.
If I may interject, that's an important step for existing data lake solutions. Like if someone already has a data lake, this is the step where you can start to understand how it's being used, right? So you don't create friction and create groups that you don't really know that need to be created and who has access to what type of data sets. So existing data lakes that need to implement a provisioning, this is critical. Observe and learn and to how to create groups. And we've used this and it's quite powerful.
Thank you. Step number 2 is now that you know what's going on, so you want to give a recommendation or set of recommendations to the data owners, wherein they can now see that here is the data, here is how we are using it, here are the gaps, here are the violations. Oh, by the way, here is what I can take an actionable recommendation that I'm getting it here so that I can go fix it immediately. So sometimes lack of that recommendation, lack of that expertise, they slow down, they create siloed solutions. So now with this step number 2, you're enabling the data owners with that visibility, with that recommendation. So that's a step number 2. Step number 3 is now that you have recommendations and you want to make it easy, someone to go create these access controls. And now this could be done by a data security operations team from the security or a combination of the data owner or data steward. But net is you're giving them a tool that automatically can go create access control policies. So this is really orchestrating the policies and provisioning them from one central place. But this is really, the tool has to be such a way that someone doesn't need to understand how access controls are implemented underneath, what type of code they have to write. So ideally a tool that can automatically create this policy for them would be best here. And that will also, again, makes it easy for them to start adopting these best practices and then implement these policies. That's a step number 3. Step number 4 is from the compliance perspective, you want to continue to keep on going on. So whether you have least privileges model, a separation of duties, a Sarbanes-Oxley, or even GDPR and privacy perspective, you have various business compliances. You want to ensure that you're meeting that baseline, and then you want to continuously monitor and then certifying who is accessing the data. Do they have real entitlements based on which they have access, no more, no less? If they have more access than they need, you want to go clean it up. So you want to continuously do this recertification process. So we believe that these 4 steps together, these frameworks, if you implement it, it brings the security and business people together and then look at the problem from the same language. They can look at it, the problem of data usage, data misusage, and then have recommendations to fix those gaps. We believe that this framework will absolutely help out reduce the business risk through this collaboration. Now, let me just take a quick look at how this works in Snowflake and other environments, that data lakes that Jerry was talking about. So here is a simple picture, and it's probably more complex and then depends on the companies, but this is one representation of what we see. We typically have Snowflake, we see, customers of Snowflake using multiple Snowflake accounts, one production, one dev accounts, and there's a sharing going on between providers and consumers. And then you have data coming into warehouse, and then you have data lakes, and then you have multiple data platforms that are used outside of Snowflake Cloud as well. So this is what we typically see. And then now that you have TrustLogix deployed in this environment, I talked about that 4 steps framework. Now that we deployed that solution here, so there's a TrustLogix, there's a central administrative console. That's where folks like data security folks and data owners can sit in and then now start getting visibility into what is going on with the data across all these platforms. And then now they can start orchestrating policies from one place across multiple Snowflake accounts, perhaps, or even other cloud platforms. I talked about the step number 1 and 2. So this is once you have TrustLogix enabled, now you can start instantaneously getting visibility into what's going on within Snowflake and who is using it and what type of policies are there, and then start looking at the recommendations as well. Now this goes across both Snowflake as well as other data platform. It could include Aurora RDS and data lakes in AWS, other platforms as well. So that's a step number 1 and 2 I talked about. Step number 3 is now that you have what's going on, and then what entitlements users have. Now you want to have access control provisioning process across this multiple clouds. So that's a step number 3. Now sitting in here, you can start creating policies across all these platforms. The other part here is as the data is coming in between these clouds, you have Snowpipe and you have data pipelines, you have various ETL tools that customers use. The data is moving through those data pipelines for the ingestion process, perhaps. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it goes out for various use cases. You also want to keep an eye on the data that is being processed there. And then you want to protect that as well right there in the pipeline before it goes to the destination usage state. So the TrustLogix solution allows you to protect or secure data as it's moving between, and then monitor how data is moving between these platforms. We do all these things using a proxyless architecture, and we spend a lot of time, not just with Jeffries like Jerry's team, make sure that we understand the requirements, but also we work with folks like Jonathan and the product management team within Snowflake to ensure that we become design partners, and then we do a cloud native integration into Snowflake. So that's why we have this architecture of proxyless. And then also we never touch the customer data. In this case, we are just looking at some metadata, we are looking at some IAM privileges and roles data, but not the real data. So that's where we call a zero trust solution. So we really believe in the zero trust, wherein if you deploy this third-party solution, you want to make sure that this solution is not bringing in any more risk to the businesses. So this architecture really scales massively as data platforms compute the scale. Now that I talked about this, let me show an experience of someone coming into TrustLogix. What would it look like? So I'm showing a dashboard. As soon as you log into InfluxLogix control plane, the admin console I talked about, you start seeing some dashboard. This is where the monitoring and alerting is happening. And now someone can look at here and then say that, look, I've got some sensitive data sitting in somewhere and then it's not protected. I got some users that have been accessed policies. Those policies are not effective because they are not using the data, even though they have access to the data, they are not, over the last 30 days, they never accessed it. So that could be perhaps because they had a need for accessing the data a few months ago, but they no longer need that access. So we are providing that in those insights by looking at the data. So we look at various data sets, audit data, Jonathan talked about in Snowflake, we look at audit history, IAM data, and policy data, roles data. We are looking at multiple data sets, including the access history, and analyzing the the access behavior that's happening within the data. Then this is the result of that. Step number 2 here is we have a recommendation engine, and that's what this is all about. We are showing the anomalous activities, and we make it easy through a risk category. I talked about the privacy legal team, and then talked about the security team. I talked about the compliance team. We make it easy for them to consume anything that is non-compliant. For example, we have various categories here: data exfiltration. People share data. They just take data out of cloud platforms to put in S3 in some cases, or there is unknown usage of happening, and we call it data exfiltration. And there is a shadow IT usage. There's an overly granted access from the identity governance perspective. You want to ensure that people don't have more than what they need. So all these categories help the community of security people to ensure that they proactively get alerted. And what we are doing really here is we are buying time for security people. When I say buying time, by proactively letting them know what's going on, they have now more time to go fix them instead of getting unexpected behaviors just without even any time for fixing them. So that's really we're buying time for security folks. So the step number 3 I talked about in the framework is the automated way to create access controls. So this is a screenshot of that. So there is a various access controls I'm showing here. The key point I want to highlight here is typically when you want to create an access control, I'm showing this in the Snowflake, but this is applicable for all other platforms as well. But typically, if you want to create an access control policy, you have to write set of the code, set of SQL commands perhaps. So we automate all that part. You don't need to understand how the access control works. So we leverage some of the capabilities in Snowflake, but we make it easy for someone to come in and create this policy. So this used to take multiple days in some cases, depends on the complexity of entitlement, complexity of the access control policies that you need to draft. It used to take days. Now we brought it down to a few minutes to create this policy. Within a few minutes, you create the policy from one center place, and then you deploy it, and then your data is protected. So what we're doing here is we are really saving time for data owners. And then that really helps data consumers get access to data much, much faster. And then we are reducing the friction between the security and business team and enabling it to move faster. So I talked about the experience, and I talked about the challenge, talked about the framework, how we are doing with Snowflake as a partner here, but also we do Snowflake plus other clouds as well. And then this is really what we deployed at Jefferies, and we have been using it, working with them very, very closely as a partner. So with this said, I'll stop here. It's been very high level. I've talked about it. Happy to take questions. Ranjit, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ganesh. So we've had questions pouring in. We've still got just a little bit less than 10 minutes left. So let's try to get through as many as we can. So there was one that had come in earlier, but it may be, given Ganesh, that you just walked through a product a little bit. How do you integrate with all these data sources? Is it APIs or connectors or native integration?
It's a great question. So we spent a lot of time before we built this architecture, and we looked at, we really wanted to understand that what is going on in general with there's a tectonical shift happened in the data architecture. Snowflake has really did this separation of compute and storage is really massively scales how data, is used today. We looked at multiple architectural patterns, and we believe that cloud native integration using APIs and native capabilities with these different data platforms. So we really partner with many vendors, including Snowflake here, to do integration with a native capability. So this is sometimes it's called API, sometimes we do data layer integrations. However, it makes sense, it's an API pattern, let me put it that way. That's why we integrate. And then the challenge there is we have to work with all these vendors and then integrate that. But that's really the complexity we take off from our customers. And that's what we are value add. But our customers don't need to worry about our complexities. We work with vendors to make it easy. But at the end of the day, what we are trying to build an architecture here is we want to create that experience for data community, the data consumers, right? The way they consume data, they use tools that they want, SQL, Spark SQL, Python, whatever they would like to be productive, they let them use that they choose to use, right? But there should not be any friction for them how they consume data. So our architecture really enables, that experience for data consumers at the end of the day.
I mean, I can say from our point of view, TrustLogix has been one of the well-behaved partners, right? Some try to do some interesting things when they integrate with us, but so far TrustLogix has basically, what's the phrase we always use with the kids? You get what you get and you don't get upset, right? They've taken the APIs and other integration methods we've given them, used those, and not come back and asked for anything special or told us that we were dumb about it. So we've appreciated that.
Always good to know, Mr. Sander. Thank you for that. So here's a question that had come in, Jerry, during yours, but I can imagine all three of you having a perspective. So I'll make it a jump ball. Maybe Jerry, I'll give you a shot to go first if you'd like, but otherwise we'll make it a jump ball. So it's how are data access monitoring and telemetry handled?
Yeah, so data monitoring is actually handled through TrustLogix because it does provide a visibility as to who's consuming what. And that really plays nicely into that last step, recertify, right? Which is really borrowed a process from identity and access management perspective, right? If you think about what TrustLogix does, it removes the concept of an application and puts users directly access to the data, which is exactly what we're doing in the identity world. We recertify access to applications. So it shouldn't be any different than recertifying access to the data directly. So the monitoring and the recertification is done through TrustLogix.
That's great, and that actually feeds in the question I had alluded to earlier. It was like a multi-part thing, but one of the parts was how do you guarantee only those people, I'm paraphrasing, that should have access internally and externally have access to the data and verify that it remains up to date. But it really feels like it's that piece that's quite crucial to that, isn't it?
That is correct. Yeah, no, recertification of access, whether to app or data directly, is crucial to this. Whether through, and identity is not part of it, right? Because you need to make sure your identity is tied to something that you trust, which in our case is AD. But if you start creating, service accounts or separate accounts that you don't know who's using that, then that it creates a challenge in itself.
Yeah, and that actually feeds into something that came into our chat, not the Q&A, but it was Sandra, it was during yours, but it was a statement that I think piggybacks off this, which is that there's a misconception in the industry that IAM or IDM can handle all of this, and more isn't needed. And that's the commenter said that Jonathan, where you were going is exactly the current approach. But it seems like, as with many things, identity has been the glue that ties a lot of this together. So, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to expand more on that, given you're both like that.
I strongly agree. In one respect, I guess I would say misconception is a weird word here, right? Because at one point, IAM was the only, identity access governance, right? IAG, it was the only game in town, really. And it's no mistake, I think, that, what we see Jerry doing here is emulating the patterns that set out, right? Because those were the right patterns, it was the wrong focus, but there really wasn't any other focus to give it, right? Because nobody had this idea of being data focused 10 years ago, right? Well, I mean, maybe somebody did, and hopefully they're retired very rich. But the point being that, most of us did not think of it this way, right? So this is still a relatively new way of thinking of things, but that doesn't mean you can't learn from excellent patterns like identity established and then apply them here, right? Which, is exactly the glue that holds all of this together in a sense.
Terrific. The questions are pouring in. Please do keep them coming in, folks. For the ones that we can't get to live in the couple of minutes we have left, we'll absolutely answer them in a written Q&A that we'll share out with everyone. Another question that came in, so maybe Jonathan, we'll start this one with you, and then Ganesh, you can follow up. Is data downloaded or exported from the UI or SnowSQL or Snowpark? Is this monitored? So maybe Jonathan, you can take that, and Ganesh can come in after you.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely it seems like that's a very specific Snowflake question with Snow right in there. The answer is yes, right? So there's nothing that happens in Snowflake that is not monitored. I'm going to crush Ganesh's answer a little bit. You guys are taking our standard sources and using those as your source material. So you certainly have the opportunity to see all of that stuff that's happening and how it's happening. Now, if the spirit of the question is, are you a DLP solution? Can you tell me everything that happens to the data from the moment it hits well, no, I'm not a DLP solution. But I'll tell you everything that happens that's under Snowflake's control, right? In that respect, yes, I have full control over the data while I'm controlling it, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, just
Awesome.
adding,
and Ganesh, yeah, exactly.
yeah, just adding to that, I think, I mean, as Jonathan said, we do look at all the audit data and then access, patterns that's going on. We can definitely report on who is accessing and then what tools they have used to access. If they're using some shadow IT tools, for example, we see these, right? People use command lines to, connect and then download the data into their local laptop machines. So we monitor for those type of specific events. We call them data exfiltration category. But we are, we can monitor and report onto that. And now we don't know what they do on their, systems. We are not a DLP endpoint security solution here. There are other solutions, but at least what we can say is we can give an audit and a tracing of, who had access and what type of queries they had run during that time to get the data out, and then what tools they have used. So that will at least get you a lot more information than like today, right? Like you may not even know what's going on there. So yeah, hopefully that answers.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think so I'll just throw it. I think often the spirit of these questions is, can you make sure that the users only get the data when they intend to use it well and within policy? And like, well, no, like if you give them access, they have access, right? And we can't read their minds, right? That's nobody can. Nobody has that technology yet, at least not on this call.
Corpus Mentis, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, but we can at least control the access really well, right?
Yeah. And so one last question, Jerry, I know you do have a hard stop. And folks, we'll keep the line open for a couple more minutes if you want to throw your final questions in. But Jerry, you mentioned that early in the process, you had some criteria you were making an evaluation. What were some of the things that were critical for you from a decision-making standpoint? Like what were the factors? Was it architecture? Was it something else that drove your selection process?
We had a few criteria points selecting our solution. One of them was performance, right? Even though there are solutions in the market that provide attribute-based access control, but they're proxy solutions, right? I think that is exactly the architecture that wouldn't scale well. The scalability and performance would have been hit. Like, how do you scale that and put it in front of S3 Bucket or Snowflake or any other cloud? You just can't. It's just not material. That was one of it, and that was driven more by the EDL team than security. That was the requirement, but I raised my hand. It's like, makes sense. Let's pick on something that is modern. Second one was Active Directory and AD group integration. That's critical. We didn't want to have another identity solution. We kind of touched on this a little bit. I want it to be seamless. Whoever you are running your process, that's the identities that's going to get access to it. That was critical as well. Integrations with multiple data sources. That was really business and EDL driven initiative. They wanted more than one. They had to have more than one because you have different business units, different data sciences. They want to be flexible. They didn't want to be cornered into one because either of their experience or the data source or capabilities of the cloud source providers.
That makes sense. Well, thank you very much for that, Jerry. We are past our time. So thank you, Jerry Kowalski, America's CISO of Jefferies, Jonathan Sander, Security Field CTO from Snowflake, Ganesh, founder and CEO of TrustLogix. Thank you all to our attendees. We appreciate you sharing some time with us. If there's questions we haven't gotten to, I've got them in the Q&A. We'll get those written up. And if any of you are joining, you probably got a confirmation email from me. So if there's other questions that occur to you, please feel free to reach out. Thank you all, participants and panelists, for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll do it again soon.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Everybody.